Sharon Green had hired a handyman for the day. But by the time his skilled hands started working on her kitchen cabinet, she found herself imagining all the other delicate things those fingers could fix. This wasn't supposed to be anything more than a professional arrangement, simple repair job in her pristine suburban kitchen, but watching Darius Martin's forearms flex as he adjusted the loose handle was doing dangerous things to her recently divorced sensibilities. The morning light streaming through her floor-to-ceiling windows caught the sheen of sweat already forming on his dark skin. Despite the early hour, his white t-shirt stretched across broad shoulders as he leaned into the cabinet, tool belt hanging low on narrow hips. Sharon adjusted her silk robe and told herself she was just being a good hostess, offering coffee, making conversation. Nothing more. "You're very thorough," she said, voice carrying more weight than the simple observation. "Deserved?" She reached for her coffee mug on the granite countertop, the movement causing her robe to gap slightly at the chest. The fabric whispered against her bare skin. Darius glanced up from his work, dark eyes meeting hers for a fraction of a second before returning to the cabinet door. His jaw tensed almost imperceptibly. Hardware like this needs the right touch. Too much pressure, and you'll strip the threads. Sharon perched on the counter stool, crossing her legs deliberately. The robe fell open just enough to reveal the smooth length of her thigh. "I imagine you know how to handle delicate things properly." The screwdriver in his hand paused mid-turn. This time, when he looked at her, the professional mask slipped just enough for her to catch something raw flickering behind his composed expression. She felt a thrill of power course through her, the same rush she used to get closing a difficult architectural contract, except infinitely more personal. "Mrs. Green," he said carefully, voice low and measured, "I'm here to fix your cabinet." "It's Ms. Green now," she corrected, taking a slow sip of coffee. "And you're doing such a wonderful job." David never could fix anything himself always. Had to call someone else to handle what he couldn't manage. Darius returned to the cabinet with renewed focus, but she noticed the slight tremor in his hands as he tightened the final screw. The kitchen filled with tension thick enough to taste sweet and dangerous like forbidden fruit. When he stepped back to test the handle, Sharon slid off the stool and moved closer than necessary, close enough to smell the clean scent of his soap mixed with honest work, close enough to see his chest rise and fall with carefully controlled breathing. "Perfect," she murmured, her fingers brushing his as she tested the smooth operation of the newly secured handle. "Though I'm sure there are other things around here that could use your attention." The sound of running water echoed from the master bathroom as Sharon climbed the stairs, steam already seeping beneath the door. She'd told Darius the faucet had been dripping for weeks, persistent annoyance that kept her awake at night. What she hadn't mentioned was how the intimate setting might affect their carefully maintained professional boundaries. She paused outside the door, listening to the methodical sounds of his work. The shower had been running when she directed him upstairs 20 minutes ago, steam filling the spacious bathroom with humid warmth. Now, wrapped in nothing but a silk camisole and matching panties, she knocked softly before entering. "Oh," she said, feigning surprise as she stepped into the moisture-thick air. "I completely forgot you were working in here. I just need to grab something." Darius knelt beside the marble vanity, tools spread across a towel on the heated tile floor. His t-shirt clung to his back where perspiration met lingering steam. When he looked up, his professional composure wavered for just a moment before reasserting itself. "Almost finished, Ms. Green. Just need another few minutes." Sharon moved to the opposite vanity, acutely aware of how the damp air made her silk camisole cling to her skin. Water droplets from her recent shower still beaded on her shoulders and collarbone, catching the soft bathroom lighting. She bent forward, ostensibly searching through a drawer. knowing the angle would draw his eyes to the curve of her body, barely concealed by the thin fabric. "Take your time," she murmured, glancing at him through the mirror. "I'm in no hurry." His knuckles whitened where he gripped a wrench, jaw working silently as he forced his attention back to the stubborn faucet fixture. The intimate space seemed to shrink around them, filled with the sound of their breathing and the occasional clink of metal against porcelain. Sharon straightened slowly, running her fingers through her damp hair in a gesture that lifted the hem of her camisole just enough to reveal the lace edge of her panties. "You know, David could never handle anything that required this much attention to detail." "Different people have different skills," Darius replied, his voice rougher than before. He tested the faucet with deliberate precision, avoiding her. "Reflection in the mirror, indeed they do." Sharon stepped closer, close enough that the heat from her skin mixed with the bathroom's humid warmth. "Some people know exactly how to work with their hands." The faucet handle turned smoothly under his touch, no longer dripping. But as he gathered his tools, the tension in the room continued to build, thick and dangerous as the steam that still clung to every surface. "All fixed," he said, standing carefully, maintaining the distance between them even as every instinct seemed to pull him closer. The bedroom ceiling fan had been wobbling for months, but Sharon had never called anyone to fix it until now. She watched Darius's position the ladder beneath the ornate fixture, his movements efficient and sure as he began disconnecting the old hardware. The afternoon light streaming through her floor-to-ceiling windows cast geometric patterns across the hardwood floor and king-sized bed that dominated the space. "This might take a while," he said, glancing down at her from his elevated position. "The previous installation wasn't done properly." "No rush at all." Sharon moved to her walk-in closet, leaving the door wide open. "I need to organize some things." Anyway, she began removing items from her lingerie drawer with deliberate slowness, each piece of silk and lace catching the light as she held it up for inspection. The large mirror on her vanity reflected her movements perfectly, and she knew Darius could see everything from his vantage point near the ceiling. "David always complained about the fan," she said conversationally, slipping out of her blouse and reaching for a black lace bra. "Said it was too loud, too slow, never quite right." She fastened the delicate clasp, adjusting the straps with careful precision. He had a lot of complaints about things not being quite right. The sound of Darius's screwdriver paused momentarily. Before resuming its steady rhythm, Sharon turned toward the mirror, studying her reflection critically. The black lace created intricate patterns against her skin, the cut emphasizing curves that had gone unappreciated for too long. "What do you think of the fit?" she asked, meeting his eyes in the mirror's reflection. "Too tight." Darius cleared, his throat, his knuckles white where they gripped the ladder. "I'm not really qualified to judge that, Ms. Green." "Oh, but you have such good hands," she replied, reaching for a red silk camisole. "I imagine you know quality when you see it." She changed pieces slowly, each movement calculated to catch the light, to draw his attention despite his obvious struggle to focus on his work. "The divorce was finalized last month," she continued, her tone deceptively casual as she tested different combinations. 22 months of legal proceedings. David wanted to make it as difficult as possible, said I'd never manage on my own." Something in her voice shifted, a crack in the confident facade that revealed genuine hurt beneath the seduction. Darius's movements stilled completely as he looked down at her, seeing perhaps for the first time the vulnerability she'd been wrapping in silk and suggestion. "Some people don't know what they have," he said quietly. Sharon met his gaze in the mirror, and for a moment the game between them paused, replaced by something raw and infinitely more dangerous. The back porch rail had developed a concerning wobble, though Sharon suspected it was more neglect than structural failure. The secluded deck overlooked her carefully manicured garden, hidden from neighboring windows by strategic landscaping that created an intimate pocket of privacy. She'd chosen a fitted yellow sundress for the afternoon work, the thin cotton soft against her skin in the late spring warmth. "Hand me that level," Darius said, examining the rail's connection points. He'd shed his work shirt in the growing heat, his dark skin gleaming with a fine sheen of perspiration as he tested each post. Sharon reached for the tool, then let it slip through her fingers with apparent clumsiness. "Oh, how clumsy of me." She bent slowly to retrieve it, the movement pulling her dress taut across her curves, the hem riding up to reveal the back of her thighs. When she straightened, Darius was staring fixedly at the railing hardware, his jaw working silently. "I brought lunch," she announced, gesturing to the wicker table she'd set with fresh strawberries, sandwiches, and iced tea. "You must be getting hungry." They sat close together on the cushioned bench, the proximity necessary for sharing the small table but creating an intimacy that felt both natural and charged. A cool breeze swept across the deck, and Sharon felt her nipples tighten against the thin fabric of her dress. She didn't move to cover herself, instead reaching for a strawberry. "These are perfect," she murmured, biting into the fruit. Juice ran down her chin, and she caught it with her finger, licking the sweetness away. "Here, try one." She selected the largest berry and held it to his lips. Darius hesitated, then opened his mouth, his eyes never leaving hers as he bit down. The intimacy of the gesture sent heat coursing through her. "I have a daughter," he said suddenly, as if the confession had been pulled from him against his will. "Zoe? She's 8. Sharon's hand stilled halfway to another strawberry. "Where's she?" "With her grandmother during the week. I get her weekends." His work-roughened fingers traced patterns on the table. "Her mother, ... We were never married." She decided she wanted different things. The vulnerability in his voice created an unexpected ache in Sharon's chest. David used to say, "I was invisible." She found herself saying, "present, but not really." They're like expensive furniture he'd forgotten he owned. Their eyes met across the small table, and something shifted between them deeper than desire, more dangerous than mere attraction. "You're not invisible," Darius said quietly. Mrs. Patterson's voice drifted from the neighboring yard, breaking the spell, but the words hung in the air between them like a promise. The garage door opener had been acting up for weeks, but Sharon had saved this particular repair for last. The golden hour light filtered through the single window, casting everything in warm amber as Darius worked beneath the mechanical assembly. She'd changed into a backless halter top that left her shoulders and spine completely exposed. The fabric tied at her neck with a delicate bow. "It's just the tension spring," he said, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. "Should have it fixed in a few more minutes." Sharon leaned against the workbench, watching the play of muscles across his back as he reached overhead. The garage felt smaller somehow, intimate despite its utilitarian purpose. "Stay for dinner," she said suddenly, the words escaping before she could stop them. Darius's hand stilled on the mechanism. "Ms. Green, Sharon," she corrected, moving closer. "And it's just dinner. I cook for one every night anyway." He climbed down from the stepladder, his expression carefully controlled. "I can't. We both know this isn't just about dinner." "What?" "If it's not," the challenge in her voice surprised them both. "What if I'm tired of pretending I don't want more than professional courtesy? You're my client." But his eyes betrayed him, drinking in the curve of her bare shoulders, the way the halter top emphasized her waist. "I'm a woman who's been alone." For 2 years, Sharon stepped closer, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his skin. "A woman who hasn't felt desired, haven't felt seen, until you walked into my house, Sharon." Her name came out rough, almost pained. She placed her hands on his chest, feeling his heart hammering beneath her palms. "Tell me you don't feel this too." His control finally cracked. "Of course I feel it," he said, backing away until he hit the workbench. "But that doesn't mean we should," she followed, pressing against him, her body fitting perfectly against his. Should what? Want each other? Touch each other. Her hands slid up his chest, and she felt his sharp intake of breath. His hands rose toward her bare back, hovering just inches from her skin. The air between them crackled with tension, so thick it was almost painful. She tilted her face up to his, their lips nearly touching, both breathing heavily in the charged silence. Then the garage door opener activated with a mechanical grinding sound. Breaking the spell so abruptly, they both jumped apart. They stared at each other across the sudden distance, chests rising and falling, desire and frustration warring in their expressions. The automatic light clicked off, leaving them in twilight shadows. But the fire between them continued to burn. The guest room window had been painted shut for years, but Sharon claimed it was essential for proper ventilation. She watched Darius work his knife along the seal, carefully separating decades of accumulated paint layers. The afternoon sun slanted through the glass, highlighting the concentration on his face as he applied steady pressure to avoid cracking the old wood frame. Her phone rang, David's name appearing on the screen like a cold splash of water. She glanced at Darius, who continued working, but whose shoulders tensed slightly at the interruption. "Hello, David," she answered, her voice carefully neutral. "Sharon, I drove by the house yesterday and noticed a truck in the driveway. Again." His tone carried that familiar note of accusation, disguised as concern. "How long exactly does it take to fix a few minor repairs?" She met Darius's eyes, seeing something flicker their awareness, perhaps even danger. "It's an old house," she said, beginning to unbutton her silk blouse with deliberate slowness. "Lots of things need attention." Darius's knife slipped slightly against the window frame. His knuckles went white where he gripped the handle. "What kind of things?" David pressed. "I could have handled most repairs myself if you'd just asked." "Could you?" Sharon let the first button fall open, then the second, never breaking eye contact with Darius. "I don't remember you being particularly ... with detailed work." The third button revealed the lace edge of her bra. Darius's breathing became audible, though he tried to mask it by scraping more vigorously at the paint. "Who is this contractor anyway?" David's voice sharpened. "Did you check his references?" "His insurance?" "Thoroughly," Sharon murmured, releasing. The fourth button, the blouse gaped open now, revealing the curve of her breasts. "He's very skilled with his hands. Knows exactly how to handle delicate situations." Darius's tool trembled visibly. A fine sheen of perspiration had appeared on his forehead despite the room's moderate temperature. "I'm just concerned about security, Sharon. It's a strange man having access to the house for days on end. He's not strange." She interrupted, undoing the final button and letting the silk slide off her shoulders entirely. "He's actually quite ... familiar now." The window suddenly gave way with a sharp crack, flooding the room with fresh air. Darius stepped back, his chest rising and falling rapidly as he stared at her half-dressed form. "I have to go, David. The work requires my full attention." She ended the call and dropped the phone onto the nearby desk, standing before Darius in nothing but her lace bra and skirt. "Now," she said softly, "where were we?" The floorboard in Sharon's home office had developed an annoying creak, though. She'd lived with the sound for months without complaint. Now, watching Darius pry up the warped planks with careful precision, she wondered why she'd suddenly felt compelled to fix it. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air as he worked. "Looks like water damage," he said, examining the subflooring. "Must have been a leak at some point." He reached into the gap between joists and paused. "There's something here." Sharon moved closer as he pulled out a manila envelope, yellowed with age and sealed with tape. Her heart stopped when she recognized David's precise handwriting across the front. Financial records confidential. I don't understand, she whispered, taking the envelope with trembling hands. I've never seen this before. Inside were bank statements, investment records, and photocopies of documents she'd never signed. Her trust fund, the inheritance from her father, had been quietly transferred into accounts she didn't recognize. Thousands of dollars moved monthly into David's private holdings. He's been stealing from me, she breathed, papers fluttering to the floor as her hands shook. For years, while I thought we were struggling to make ends meet, he was... The reality hit her like a physical blow. She sank to her knees among the scattered documents. Years of gaslighting and manipulation suddenly crystallizing into undeniable proof. The tears came then, hot and overwhelming. Darius was beside her instantly, his strong hands framing her face, thumbs wiping away tears. Sharon, look at me. You're going to be okay. She looked up into his dark eyes, seeing genuine care, where David had only shown calculation. The gentleness in his touch after so much deception broke something loose inside her chest. I was so stupid, she whispered. No. His voice was fierce. You trusted someone who didn't deserve it. That doesn't make you stupid. The space between them disappeared. She kissed him desperately, pouring all her hurt and relief into the contact. His response was immediate, his hands sliding into her hair as she pressed against him. They fell back onto the scattered papers, her dress riding up as she straddled him. His shirt coming undone under her urgent fingers. Sunlight painted golden stripes across their entwined bodies as months of careful restraint finally shattered. His mouth moved from her lips to her throat, her back arching as his hands explored the curves he'd been fighting not to touch. Darius, she gasped against his ear, feeling him hard beneath her. Neither of them heard the car pulling into the driveway. Outside, the front door lock had been sticking for weeks, but Sharon hadn't bothered mentioning it until now. She and Darius had barely managed to separate and straighten their clothes when the sound of a key turning in the stubborn mechanism echoed through the foyer. Her lipstick was smudged, her hair disheveled, and Darius's shirt remained half-buttoned as they faced the door together. David stepped inside without knocking, his expensive suit immaculate despite the evening hour. His pale eyes swept the scene. Sharon's flushed face, Darius's obvious state of undress, the scattered financial documents still visible through the office doorway. Well, David said, his voice deceptively calm. This is cozy. Sharon moved instinctively toward the center of the foyer, positioning herself between the two men. You don't live here anymore, David. You can't just walk in. I still have a key. He held up the brass object like evidence, and clearly I should be checking on things more often. His gaze fixed on Darius with naked hostility. I don't believe we've been properly introduced. Darius stepped forward. Slightly, his posture protective without being aggressive. Darius Martin, the handyman. David's tone dripped condescension. Tell me, Mr. Martin, do you always work such intimate hours with your female clients? The racial undertone wasn't subtle. Sharon felt heat rise in her chest, not desire this time, but fury. Get out, David. I'm concerned about you, Sharon. This man has been here for days, taking advantage of your vulnerable state. The only person who took advantage of me was you. Sharon's voice cut through his practiced concern. I found the documents, David. The bank transfers, the forged signatures. All of it. David's composure slipped for just a moment before reassembling itself. I don't know what you think you found, but you're clearly confused. Emotional, not thinking clearly. His eyes flicked meaningfully to Darius. I can see why. Darius's hands clenched at his sides. You need to leave. Now? I don't take orders from hired help. David replied, stepping closer. Especially not from someone who clearly doesn't understand his place. The air in the foyer grew thick with tension. Sharon could feel the barely restrained violence radiating from both men, but where David's aggression felt cold and calculating, Darius's protective instincts burned with righteous heat. "My place," Darius said quietly, "is wherever Sharon wants me to be." Sharon looked between them, David with his familiar threats and manipulations, Darius with his honest strength and genuine care. The choice had never been clearer than stay. She said to Darius, her voice steady despite her racing heart, "David, you have 5 minutes to leave before I call the police." The morning light filtered through the kitchen windows as Sharon padded barefoot across the hardwood floor, wearing nothing but Darius's work shirt from the night before. The cotton fabric hung loose on her frame, the hem barely covering her. Black lace panties as she handed him tools for the new security system installation. "Motion sensor goes here," he said, marking the wall near the front entrance. His eyes followed the movement of her bare legs as she stretched to reach the level on the high shelf. They'd been working since sunrise, replacing every lock. David had access to and installing cameras at each entry point. The intimacy of the task securing their shared space against outside threats created a domestic partnership that felt both urgent and deeply personal. "Hand me that screwdriver," Sharon said, kneeling beside him as he wired the control panel. Her thigh brushed his arm, the contact sending familiar heat through both of them. What had started as accidental touches while working in close quarters quickly became deliberate. His fingers lingered when passing her tools. She leaned closer, then necessary to examine his progress, her shirt gaping open to reveal the curve of her breast. "You don't have to help with this," Darius said, though his hand stilled when she placed her palm over his. "I can handle the installation. I want to understand how it works." Sharon's voice carried deeper meaning. "I need to know I can protect myself." The doorbell rang, interrupting the charged moment. Sharon glanced down at her state of undress and smiled. "That'll be Jennifer, my sister." She answered the door without changing, and Jennifer's eyebrows rose at the sight of Sharon in an obviously masculine shirt, her hair still mussed from sleep. "Well," Jennifer said, taking in Darius working shirtless in the background. "I see. You've been ... busy." "Jennifer, this is Darius." "Darius, my sister Jennifer." He stood, reaching for a clean shirt from his bag. "Nice to meet you." Jennifer's knowing smile took in the scene, the new locks, the security equipment, the obvious intimacy between them. "David always said you couldn't handle things on your own," she told Sharon quietly. "Looks like he was wrong about that too." After Jennifer left, Sharon and Darius resumed their work with renewed focus. The threat David posed had crystallized. Something between them, they were no longer just attracted to each other. They were partners, united against a common enemy. "There," Darius said, testing the final sensor. "The system's active." Sharon moved into his arms, her body fitting perfectly against his chest. "Thank you for all of this." His hands settled on her waist, possessive and protective. "We're in this together now." The shower head had been perfectly fine, but Sharon claimed it needed adjustment. Steam filled the master bathroom as hot water cascaded over the marble tiles. And she watched Darius work, shirtless beneath the spray, water streaming down the defined muscles of his back and shoulders. "The pressure's still not quite right," she said, though they both knew it was a lie. The shower worked perfectly, had always worked perfectly. Darius turned to face her, water dripping from his hair, his dark eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Sharon." Her name on his lips sounded like a prayer, a question, and a surrender all at once. She stepped closer to the glass enclosure, her silk robe clinging to her curves in the humid air. "Maybe I should test it myself," she whispered, letting the robe slip from her shoulders. The thin barrier of glass between them felt insurmountable and fragile at the same time. Darius's gaze traveled over her naked form, drinking in every curve, every line he'd been imagining for days. She opened the shower door and stepped inside, the hot water immediately soaking her hair, streaming down her body. The space that had seemed spacious suddenly felt intimate, charged with steam and desire and the sound of water against tile. "The pressure feels perfect to me," she breathed, moving closer until their bodies were almost touching. His hands found her waist, pulling her against him, and she gasped at the contact, skin against skin, slick with water and need. Her back met the cool marble wall as his mouth claimed hers, desperate and demanding after days of restraint. Water cascaded over them, both as his hands explored her body with reverent hunger, mapping every curve he'd memorized from stolen glances. She arched into his touch, her fingers trailing down his chest, lower, until he groaned against her neck. "Tell me you want this," he whispered, his voice rough with desire. "I've wanted this since the moment you walked into my house," she confessed, her legs wrapping around his waist as he lifted her. The steam obscured and revealed them in turns, creating a dreamlike intimacy as they moved together with increasing urgency. Her moans echoed off the marble walls, mixing with the sound of falling water and his deep groans of pleasure. When release finally claimed them both, they clung to each other under the spray, hearts racing, breathing ragged. The last barriers between them had finally dissolved, washed away like everything else under the relentless cascade of water. "We should probably get out," Darius murmured against her damp hair. Though neither of them moved, outside the bathroom, Sharon's phone buzzed with an unknown number, the sound barely audible over the running water the foundation inspection had revealed. More than structural issues hidden beneath the basement floorboards were additional financial documents that painted a complete picture of David's deception. Sharon sat across from attorney Sandra Mills in the sleek downtown office, her posture confident in a way that would have been impossible weeks ago. Darius's hand rested possessively on her thigh, a gesture both intimate and supportive. "The evidence is overwhelming," Sandra said, spreading the documents across her mahogany desk. "Wire transfers, forged signatures, unauthorized access to your trust fund. We're talking about felony embezzlement." Sharon's fingers intertwined with Darius's, drawing strength from his steady presence. The woman who had once hidden behind silk robes and careful seduction had been replaced by someone who owned her power completely. Every movement carried confidence, every glance held determination. "What are my options?" she asked, her voice steady. "Criminal charges, civil recovery, or a negotiated settlement?" Given the amounts involved, double quotes, Sandra paused meaningfully. David will want to avoid prosecution. The coffee shop meeting that afternoon felt like a different world from the marble and glass of the law office. David sat hunched over his untouched latte, his expensive suit unable to disguise the defeat in his shoulders. Sharon entered with Darius, their connected presence unmistakable, her hand on his arm, its protective stance, the easy intimacy between them. "Sharon," David began, attempting his old tone of condescending concern, "I think you're being manipulated by people who don't understand our situation." "Our situation?" Sharon slid into the booth across from him, Darius settling beside her with quiet authority. "You mean the situation where you've been stealing from me for 3 years?" David's eyes flicked to Darius with barely concealed hatred. "This is about him, isn't it? You're throwing away everything we built for some choose-your-next-words very carefully," Darius said quietly, his voice carrying dangerous calm. Sharon placed her hand over Darius's, both restraining and claiming him. "This is about me, finally. Seeing clearly. About understanding what real partnership looks like." She leaned forward, and David seemed to shrink under her steady gaze. "You have 48 hours to transfer every stolen dollar back to my accounts. In exchange, I won't press criminal charges. And if I refuse?" Sharon's smile held no warmth. "Then my attorney files with the district attorney Monday morning, and you can explain your creative accounting to a jury." David's mask finally slipped, completely revealing the desperate, diminished man beneath. As they left the coffee shop, Darius's arm around her waist, Sharon felt the last chains of her old life finally break away. "How does it feel?" Darius asked as they walked to the car. "Like I can finally breathe," she replied, pulling him down for a kiss that promised everything. The porch swing had developed a gentle squeak, but Sharon found she didn't mind the sound anymore. 6 months had transformed everything: the house, her life, her understanding of what home actually meant. She sat in a flowing yellow sundress, watching Darius teach his daughter Zoe how to adjust the swing's chain tension. Their dark heads bent together in concentration. "Like this, Daddy?" Zoe asked, gripping the wrench with both small hands. "Perfect. Just remember, gentle pressure. You don't want to force it." Sharon smiled at the unconscious echo of their first meeting when he'd spoken those same words about cabinet hardware. Now his tools had a permanent place in the garage, his clothes shared space in her closet, and his daughter's weekend visits had become the rhythm around which their weeks revolved. "Ms. Sharon," Zoe called. "Daddy says you used to design big buildings." "I still do," Sharon replied, moving to join them on the porch. "Just from home now." Darius's hand found the small of her back, a possessive touch that still sent heat through her even in the innocent context of an 8-year-old's presence. Their eyes met briefly, and she saw the promise there later after bedtime. When they could express their connection without restraint, the evening unfolded with comfortable domesticity. Dinner at the kitchen table where they'd first shared strawberries. Zoe's homework spread across the same surface where scattered financial documents had once revealed David's betrayal. The past felt distant now, like someone else's story. As Zoe worked on math problems, Sharon caught Darius watching her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. His gaze traveled from her face down to where the sundress's thin straps had slipped slightly off her shoulders, revealing the delicate line of her collarbone. When their fingers brushed passing Zoe's juice cup, the simple contact sent familiar electricity racing through her. After Zoe's bath and bedtime story, Sharon and Darius finally found themselves alone in their bedroom, truly theirs now, redecorated to erase every trace of her previous life. The security system Darius had installed months ago blinked its steady green light, but the real safety came from the man who pulled her against him in the lamplight. "She's amazing," Sharon murmured against his chest, breathing in the familiar scent of his skin. "She likes you," Darius replied, his hands sliding down to the hem of her sundress. "Asks about you all week when she's at her grandmother's." The dress pooled on the floor in a whisper of yellow cotton, followed by his shirt. In the golden lamplight, they came together with a desperate passion that hadn't dimmed despite months of nights like this. His mouth claimed hers hungrily as his hands rediscovered the curves that had driven him to distraction that first morning in her kitchen. Sharon's back arched against their shared bed as his lips traveled the familiar path down her throat, across her collarbone, lower. Her fingers tangled in his hair, guiding him, claiming him as completely as he claimed her. The sounds of their lovemaking filled the room: soft gasps, whispered endearments, the rustle of sheets against heated skin. When they finally lay spent and entwined in the darkness, Sharon traced lazy patterns on his chest, marveling at how perfectly her body fit against his. "I love you," she whispered, the words still carrying wonder even after countless repetitions. "I love you too," he replied, pulling her closer until she could feel his heartbeat against her cheek. "Both of you." Outside, the night was quiet and safe. The house that had once felt like a prison now hummed with contentment, filled with laughter and tools and the promise of countless mornings where Sharon would wake up and find new reasons for skilled hands to fix the things that mattered most.